Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining my colleagues, nonprofit organizations, and me today for the introduction of the Nonprofit Equity Bill Package of 2023. I also want to thank Sacramento-based nonprofit Weave for hosting us today for this press conference. California is home to over 110,000 nonprofits that provide essential services to low-income communities of color. The state relies on nonprofits to help put critical policies into action to build affordable housing, respond to the impacts of climate change, provide meals to the hungry, and improve the lives of California families. The COVID-19 pandemic caused the need for these critical services to increase exponentially, leaving nonprofit workers overworked and unsupported to meet the needs of Californians facing evictions, unemployment, and illness. Nonprofits face staff shortages, noting burnout, non-competitive salaries, and fear of COVID led many workers to leave the nonprofit workforce. Last year, as chair of the Assembly Select Committee on the nonprofit sector, I was proud to have chaired a joint committee hearing where nonprofit leaders shared the impacts that the pandemic had on their services, operations, and staff. What we found out was that nonprofits need a helping hand to serve our most vulnerable communities. Nonprofits need flexible government contracts, prompt payments on invoices, reimbursement of indirect costs, and expedited contract renewals so that they can avoid taking out loans to cover program costs. This nonprofit bill package is a response and a product of that hearing. My colleagues and I are gathered here today to present our respective bills and how they lend a helping hand to California's nonprofits. My bill, AB 885, proposes that state contracts with nonprofit partners cover the full cost of doing business and provides the state with the option to enter into multi-year contracts to ensure that nonprofits have the financial stability to retain and hire staff as they continue to serve struggling Californians. This bill encourages multi-year contracts that would help cover administrative costs, fair wages, benefits, and service delivery, so we can assure that these critical services provided by nonprofits are not interrupted. Next up, I want to introduce Jan Masoka, Chief Executive Officer of Cal Nonprofits and a critical partner for all of us here.
Thank you. Hi. You know, I know I'm going to remember this day for the rest of my life, and not just because we're having this session in such a nonprofit store that helps women. I really love that part of this too. You know, I think that this is also an important turning point for the partnership between nonprofits and government. As many of you know, nonprofits community as a whole relies for about 30% of its total income from government, and in parallel, government relies on nonprofits. For example, 1/3 of Medi-Cal services are delivered by nonprofit organizations. So these bills, as you know, as the Assemblywoman just mentioned, look at fixing the interface between government and nonprofits to make it a more sustainable partnership. For example, if homeless serving nonprofits can't get cost of doing business increases, then they're not able to hire staff, and without staff, none of us will be able to deliver the homeless services or meet the homeless goals that we have. Similarly, if child care nonprofits can't get prompt payments, they're not able to fulfill their need, our state's need for child care. As we know, we've just lost 20,000 child care slots in California, just pointing out the importance of having those kinds of payment mechanisms. So not just our safety net, but also the full spectrum of the nonprofit community works closely with government. And in some ways, this historic package of bills, the California Equity Initiative, could also be called a declaration of interdependence, because it's a declaration of how the fact that we are partners and a step towards making that partnership even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan and Cal Nonprofits. Next up, we have Assemblymember Josh Lowenthal.
Thank you, everyone. Honored to be part of the coalition of members determined to modernize the way the state interacts with our nonprofit partners. Nonprofits deliver crucial services to our constituents, and we must do everything in our power to facilitate access to funding and grant dollars awarded to nonprofits by the state. AB 696 is a key component in the effort to modernize contracting and will require the state to provide for and accept electronic signatures, electronic transmissions of documents, and electronic fund transfers. For example, state public health, housing and homelessness, and corrections programs payments in the tens of millions of dollars are issued today via paper checks sent through the U.S. mail. And just last month, a Los Angeles nonprofit housing provider was mailed a paper check for $20 million. When the occasional check is inevitably lost in the mail, it can take more than 2 months to have it reissued. An example of positive change, nonprofit child care service providers were able to secure wire transfer payments from the Department of Developmental Services just a few months ago. It is clear from this example that solutions to these problems are feasible and relatively easy to achieve. Giving nonprofits like disability centers and preschools access to fast, secure, trackable payments saves everyone time and money. We already have available online invoicing and end-to-end online contract management through Cal eProcure. Building on the example of that system, we can create similar cloud-based solutions that are appropriate for state grants and contracts with our nonprofits. Smart cloud-based solutions that enable everything to be filed online, like the Department of Education's grantee portal, are transparent. They save staff time for the state as well as local nonprofits. These technologies are widely available, and it's time to utilize them at the state level in order to streamline contracting and grant administration with nonprofits. The modernization we're talking about is well within our reach. I look forward to working with my colleagues, nonprofit stakeholders, and the administration on this package of legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblymember Lowenthal. Next, we have Senator Tom Udall.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Assemblymember Luz Rivas, for your leadership on this really important issue in terms of equity for nonprofits. You do the work. We know through the pandemic that we couldn't exist in California. We couldn't take care of the folks that we care about without the assistance, without the leadership of the nonprofit community. And I'm just honored to be standing here with so many leaders in the nonprofit community. I'm carrying SB 336. And what that does, SB 336 addresses an inequity in how nonprofits are reimbursed. The federal government, believe it or not, is ahead of California in terms of reimbursement for indirect costs. So nonprofits basically have to absorb those costs of transportation, administrative costs. What SB 336 does is it focuses on this inequity and allows nonprofits to be reimbursed from the state of California when they apply for a grant or reimbursed for a grant for their indirect costs. It's just a matter of equity. So thank you again. Thank you to Weave for hosting us today. Thank you, Assemblymember Luz Rivas, for your leadership. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Assemblymember Evelyn Valencia.
Thank you. Good morning. Buenos dias. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Assemblymember Evelyn Valencia, and I am pleased to stand here today alongside so many colleagues and allies to talk about our nonprofit bill package. Before my arrival to the state legislature, I served as an Anaheim City Council member during an extremely difficult and unprecedented time. Throughout the COVID pandemic, many residents and families did not know where the next meal would come from, or if they were going to be able to receive vital health services. There was much fear and uncertainty, as we all know. During these moments, we knew who to lean on, and who came through our nonprofits. As vaccines became available, I collaborated with local nonprofits to bring community vaccination sites into neighborhoods. I can vividly remember the look on residents' faces that were filled with gratitude and thankfulness for the vaccine that was life-saving. Nonprofits delivered to our communities when we needed them most, and that's exactly what we need to do now for our nonprofits. I'm proud to author AB 860, the bill that will support the state's inequity goals by reducing the effort and expense associated with applying for and receiving grants funded by small nonprofits. AB 860 establishes reasonable limits on what administrators may ask of grant recipients. which will streamline nonprofits' ability to apply for and receive state grants. Additionally, this bill specifies the administrators of the grants must distribute at least 50% of the grant award upon execution. AB 860 will ensure timely delivery of small grants so that nonprofits provide a continuity of services to our communities. I look forward to seeing the success of this nonprofit bill package along with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Assemblymember Greg Hart.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues and the nonprofit leaders that are here today for introducing these really important bills. One of the things that's the biggest barrier to nonprofits providing services to the neediest Californians is the payment reimbursement model that we use, where folks have to provide the services and then be reimbursed later by the state of California. That is a huge barrier to community organizations that serve the neediest Californians because they don't have the cash flow to absorb those additional costs. So my bill, AB 590, will provide nonprofits with advance payments when they receive state grants and contracts. It's astonishing to me that many nonprofits rely on high-interest loans to cover the cost of implementing state grants and contracts. For example, one nonprofit paid over $28,000 in interest last year waiting for payments from the state. We have to fix that problem. Providing advance payments will bolster the nonprofit sector and ensure they can continue to perform critical work in communities across the state of California. I am very excited to work with this coalition and my colleagues on these important bills today.
Thank you. Next, we have Assemblymember Stephanie Nguyen.
Thank you, Assemblymember. Stephanie Nguyen, Assemblymember for AD 10. And I want to thank my colleagues for authoring these bills. As someone who ran a nonprofit organization for over 10 years, I can tell you that everything they said was absolutely true. During the pandemic, nonprofit organizations stepped up. But it's not just during the pandemic, it's every single day that they step up to serve the community that is most needed. They step up and they serve those with barriers, those that can't get the services they need anywhere else. As someone who ran a nonprofit organization, I know that to be true more than everything. I want to thank those that are in this industry right now, because I know this for sure. You do this work not to impress, but to express your love for the community. You do this work for a cause, not for applause. And you do this work without any striving for presence in the community, but when you are absent, the community feels it. So thank you so much to my colleagues back there for authoring bills to support organizations that serve our community who are most often overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. As you can tell, we have members that have experience running nonprofits. I'm a nonprofit founder. We have nonprofit advocates, and our next speaker is one of them. She is the chair of the Senate Select Committee on the nonprofit sector, and when she was in the Assembly, she also chaired the Assembly Select Committee on the nonprofit sector. So next up, we have Senator Monique Limone.
Thank you to Assemblywoman and Chair Luz for the introduction. I'm Senator Monique Limone, and I represent Santa Barbara and Ventura counties along here with my colleague Greg Hart. And I'm honored to be here among colleagues and leaders really to unveil this nonprofit equity initiative. The nonprofit sector, as you've all heard, is the fourth largest employer in our state, earning more than $34 billion in revenue and employs an estimated 2 million Californians. As employers, service providers, and primary government partners, nonprofits are the social and economic drivers for our communities. Today, I want to recognize the resilience and strength of California nonprofits during some of the challenging times that we've had over the past years. Nonprofits were on the forefront of providing critical resources to ensure our communities could continue to thrive during the pandemic, highlighting how integral they are to our state. And I remain committed to working with our nonprofits to ensure a robust economic recovery. As the chair of the Senate Select Committee on the Nonprofit Sector, I'm proud to present the California Nonprofit Contracting Equity Initiative legislative package. My bill, Senate Bill 557, is one of multiple bills that will increase equity for California nonprofits. SB 557 would update the state's Prompt Payment Act to all nonprofit grants and contracts. It would set a minimum discrepancy amount. It would remove the existing eligibility cap on nonprofit contracts and include any penalties paid to nonprofits in DGS required annual report. SB 577 ensures that California nonprofits can receive additional grants and contracts for the betterment of our communities. California nonprofits highlight how policies create tangible change to improve our vulnerable communities. Passing Senate Bill 557 and all the bills in the California Nonprofit Equity Initiative will strengthen the essential partnership between our state and nonprofits and our mutual efforts to promote the mission of equity through the delivery of vital services to residents in California. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Beth Hassett, CEO of Weave, which we are here today. Thank you again for hosting.
Thank you all for being here. It's always nice to show the work that we do. This is part of our operation that ensures that the families we serve have clothing, since many of them have left their homes without clothing. And that's just one of the safety net items that we provide. The California state government, as we've heard, relies on nonprofits to fill the important gaps and deliver services not provided by traditional government programs, and we bear the responsibility of ensuring that those services are equitable, inclusive, and accessible. The cost of delivering services seldom is fully compensated, especially when we take the reporting requirements into account. So we at Weave are thrilled that the many burdens placed on nonprofit organizations who contract with the state will be addressed through this bills package. Most grants require nonprofits to launch programs and incur costs and submit for reimbursement. Weave is fortunate to have additional non-governmental sources of revenue to tide us over as we wait. Many smaller nonprofits do not have this luxury, and as a result, they don't pursue funding that could help their communities. We applaud the bills that ensure that nonprofit organizations receive compensation in a timely fashion and offer the opportunity to receive advance payments for new contracts. The manual invoicing system for receiving compensation is extremely time-consuming and labor-intensive. Recently, we've had to choose between hiring an additional full-time staff member in our finance department or switching to quarterly invoicing. We had to choose to go even longer between getting compensated via the quarterly option because the de minimis paid to support administrative costs was insufficient to fund an additional staff member. Again, Weave has the financial flexibility to make this choice, yet many agencies can't go 3 months without payment and are forced to take on additional reporting burdens. So we support solutions that would require the Department of General Services to negotiate an indirect cost rate that would ensure nonprofits are fairly and fully compensated for the infrastructure needed to do our work. If the government continues to rely on nonprofit organizations to deliver critical services, we need these improvements. Thanks to all of the legislators behind me and not here at the moment who've worked together to put this package together that will ensure the most vulnerable among us have access to life-changing and life-saving services throughout the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Hart Dietz, CEO of PATH.
Good morning. Sure. Thank you. I might be a little shorter than everyone else. As mentioned, my name's Jennifer Hart Dietz, and I am the CEO of PATH. And if you don't know a little bit about PATH, we are a statewide nonprofit homeless service provider and housing developer, partnering with over 150 cities, and we serve about 16% of our unhoused population. We have staff of about 1,200 who are working every step of the homeless response system, from street outreach to intensive case management to building and preserving affordable housing. PATH is just one nonprofit working to address the homeless crisis, and the bills being proposed today will not only help us provide life-saving services, but they'll also help nonprofits of all scopes and sizes achieve their missions. Nonprofit organizations are often the social safety net. We stand up to fill in our response systems, and we work towards a more equitable, fair, and safer California. The state government is a vital partner in our work, and I'm relieved and grateful when state leaders proclaim homelessness as the crisis that we all see it today and as a top priority, because we all need to work together to address this. As a nonprofit organization that is carrying out our shared goal of helping people make it home, we often wait months to be paid for our contracted work. We spend down our own reserves to properly compensate our staff who have devoted their careers to our most vulnerable population. We pay out of pocket to cover the costs of doing business, like hiring, quality assurance, and facility expenses. For a large organization like PATH, navigating this dynamic is an enormous challenge. But for some smaller nonprofits, it can be almost impossible. During the depths of the pandemic, as you heard from some of our partners today, we swiftly expanded to meet the emergency needs. Our staff of essential workers spent countless nights, weekends, standing up quarantine and isolation shelters, procuring and distributing protective equipment, and doing whatever necessary to keep people safe. But we are in a homeless crisis today, not just during the pandemic. Nonprofits like PATH, we want to do this work. I'm honored every day to work with an amazing group of dedicated people who are passionate and patient, and they inspire me greatly. And as a social worker myself, I'm proud that PATH is helping to create a future where every person has a home. But the current contracting structure in California expects nonprofits to use their scarce resources to accomplish our shared goals, and it isn't sustainable. It will push more people out of our profession at a time when voters expect the state to do everything possible. The bills announced today will create a more equitable partnership between nonprofits and the state. As you heard, advance payments are critical in ramping up these needed resources. Full cost funding would recognize the critical and essential contribution of nonprofit service providers. And when we want to make sure that we're doing quality work, we need these all to come into play. So we want to continue to be a partner with the state. We're appreciative of everyone here and Cal Nonprofits for bringing this today. We really believe that we can see a better future and a better partnership through these bills. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone that is here joining us. As you've heard from our nonprofit partners, all of these bills are critical to helping them deliver the services that they provide to our communities. And that's why I'm very excited to introduce this initiative, and excited that all my colleagues that are here today, and some of them that were not able to be here today, are part of this, are partnering with me to get these bills through. So thank you very much. If there are any questions for any of us? Okay, well, we are, this is just the beginning. We've all introduced our bills that will be going through the legislative process. I hope that anyone watching our press conference will support these bills, and please feel free to reach out to any of the authors if you have any questions. Again, thank you to Weave for hosting us, Cal Nonprofits for being such a great partner for all of us in the legislature. These members that are here today are very dedicated to the nonprofit sector, as founders, advocates, and we all want to make sure that this sector thrives in our state. Thank you very much.